So I've had the Galaxy Z Fold 2 for about 3 weeks now, and I have to say, this is one of the most unique products I've used in a long time. It is definitely something that screams future, because if you haven't actually gotten a chance to use one of these, it's one of those just experiences that you don't get too often, especially nowadays, because we're so used to having slab smartphones, we're so used to having tablets that look all the same. There's nothing really crazy or unique about it. And we're now getting back into that kind of crazy, weird form factor with phones, which is great to see. So the Z Fold 2 is one of them. Another one that comes to mind is the LG Wing. And I love that because it's exciting. It brings tech, it brings excitement to tech that we haven't had in a while. So we've all gotten used to traditional slab smartphones like this, you know, and we need something fresh, something new. And I think that this is a really great thing. So obviously this isn't the first one. We did have the Galaxy Fold last year, and that was totally unique, but that one I don't think sold as well because of its initial issues. But the second generation, they resolved a lot of those problems and also made the phone way better than it was. So we went from a really small display on the front, I think it was 4.3 inches, to a 6.2 inch display on the front. And although it's narrow, it still is like a traditional smartphone. So it's kind of unassuming if you were to see it like this. If you turn it to the side, you can see the thickness. So that kind of leads you to believe that there is something more to this, and there is. And on the inside, that's where the magic is. And this is the craziest part because this is a folding phone. The screen itself folds. We have not had that in any other device, and Samsung is definitely one of those companies that has tried something new here, and it's really, really cool.
So just looking at the design of the Z Fold 2, it is still reminiscent of the Galaxy Fold. However, we do have quite a few changes on here. It is like, I guess you could describe it as kind of a sandwich, kind of a glass sandwich. If we compare to a traditional smartphone, you can see the difference immediately because obviously a traditional smartphone is going to have a much wider screen, not as narrow as this front screen here. And this traditional smartphone is going to be a lot thinner because they get thinner and thinner every year. However, if we compare it to the Z Fold 2, it is much thicker because it's basically like two smartphones put together. So the changes from the Fold 1 are the screen, obviously. We have on the front now a 6.2 inch display, high resolution, 60 hertz display, absolutely beautiful. And people complain about the first Fold because of that tiny screen. And initially I thought I would be using this front screen more, but I have been at home, so I haven't really taken it out or anything like that. So I could see using it in a pinch, but the keyboard experience on here is not as good as I would hope. Trying to type on here is kind of hard, so yeah, I'm not very good at typing on this, but if I had the choice, I would definitely just open this up and use the inner screen instead, because it is a much better typing experience. Another thing to mention here is we do have a front-facing camera on the front here as well as on the inner display there. They are both the same. Another thing to note is the inclusion of screen protectors on both the front and the inner display. And the one on the inner display is not the greatest. It does kind of distort images just a little bit, and I've seen people take this screen protector off, and they've said there's no real issue with taking it off, and it does make the screen look a lot better. However, it is still a plastic, although they call it glastic screen, so I'd be very wary of that just because it is more fragile than a traditional glass display is. As far as performance is concerned, this phone is no slouch at all. So this is on the high performance mode in the battery, so we have 963 single core and 3263 multi-core score. Again, not a slouch at all. This thing is a beast. It has a Snapdragon 865 Plus, 12 gigs of RAM, Adreno 650 graphics, and yeah, it runs like an absolute champ. So with the unlocked model, the only bloatware you're really going to get is Netflix and Facebook that I knew of, and you have all the traditional Samsung apps here. which is really good. You have the Microsoft apps also. I don't know if you count that as bloatware or not, but they do have that partnership with Microsoft, so you have all your Samsung apps there. One thing to note that I thought was kind of interesting was that Drew actually got a Samsung Galaxy S20 FE, and that had less bloatware than the Z Fold 2 did. So that was kind of interesting. Now, if you are considering the Z Fold 2, one thing to consider here is that this does not have an IP rating. It does not have a water or dust resistance rating whatsoever. So you do not want to take this around water or dust. And obviously, if you have this phone, you do want to be careful because it's a little bit more fragile than a traditional smartphone is. Now, the outside is glass on both sides, so the outside isn't really the issue. The inner screen is the more fragile portion of this. Now, a friend on Twitter, Gary, who runs his own YouTube channel, Contractor's Point of View, he had the Galaxy Fold, and he works in construction, so he has seen some tough days with his Galaxy Fold. So I'll leave a link down below to his channel if you want to check him out. And he goes over in a couple of his videos how he's used the Galaxy Fold in his line of work, and I thought that was pretty interesting. So it's not as fragile as you think, but I would take precaution just because it is an expensive phone. The inner screen is a plastic, well, they call it glastic, I guess, so it's kind of a plastic glass, but you have to be very wary of it because it's not glass. So even a fingernail or pushing too hard on the screen or touching the center right here where the hinge is something you really don't want to do. So you can't quite use and abuse the inner screen as you could, like, say, the outside. So the outside is glass on both sides, so those should be a little bit better suited for different environments. But when you're using that inner screen, definitely be careful. And if you do take that screen protector off, be even more careful. So now, luckily, I wasn't the only one to get the Z Fold 2 to try out. So I did want to talk to my friend Drew real quick and find out what he liked and what he didn't like about the Z Fold 2. So let's go ahead and talk to him real quick.
My two pros on the Z Fold 2 are the inner display. I think it's absolutely beautiful, vivid, and really looks great. And then I also love that it's an all-in-one package. So I literally could replace my iPad with it and be happy because it's a phone and tablet in one.
Okay, so I've had the Z Fold 2 for around a month now, and honestly, it's a really good device. I really have a hard time finding any cons for this thing, but I'd say a few pros I have are the giant inner display. It's running at 120 hertz. It's honestly like really solid. I'd also say the rear camera having a second display is also really nice. Being able to use that rear camera as a main camera or selfie camera is actually really helpful.
For me, with the Z Fold 2, I really like the battery performance. I get easily 8 to 9 hours of on-screen time, which is really incredible compared to other Samsung devices I've used. And then also for me, another huge pro would be the outside display. While 60 hertz, I really like the outside display compared to the first generation Fold. It's usable and it works great really all the time.
As far as cons, so the only two cons I have really are I'm a little scared of the inner display because it is that kind of glastic or plastic that they have, so I'm just afraid that something could happen there. And then the other is the Mystic Black version is a total fingerprint magnet, so obviously just like the other glossy phones out there, it's just
Okay, so it's like I said, cons are kind of a hard thing with me, but I'd say one of the biggest cons of this phone is the camera quality. It's really not too great for a $2,000 phone. It's not bad, but it's not $2,000 worthy. Another con I'd say, speaking of $2,000, is the price of this phone. It's $2,000. It's not really too reasonable. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be several returns of this phone after buying it, but I'm honestly keeping in mind it's a great device, and I'll go ahead and pass it to Drew.
Yeah, so for me, the app support when it comes to folding displays isn't the greatest right now. It's getting better, definitely since the first generation Fold, but it's still not quite there with all applications. And then also for me, just being a parent, multiple kids, and just everyday use, I didn't find it that practical for me to have to open the display and kind of mess with the actual device all day long. But overall, it was a pretty solid phone, and it is hard to find cons for this device.
So one other cool thing I wanted to show off here with the Z Fold 2 is the inclusion of DeX, which obviously isn't just included in the Z Fold 2, but is a really cool feature. So you can basically turn any TV or monitor into a kind of computer monitor, and you could use this as a desktop kind of thing. So I do have it connected to my TCL Roku TV. It was very easy to connect wirelessly, and you can also use the phone itself as a trackpad, which is pretty cool. So you have this large 7.6-inch display to use as a trackpad there, so it's pretty cool. So you have all the apps that are included with your phone. So I can go in here, I can check out maps, I can check out YouTube, and you can scroll through everything right here, which is great. Watch a video, you've got Netflix, and whatever app you have on here should show up on DeX, which is really, really cool. And again, it's just like a full desktop experience. At the bottom, we have a little taskbar with a home button, back button. You have your open apps, you have time and date, your Wi-Fi, you can take screenshots, all kinds of cool stuff here. So I just wanted to show that real quick there. Alright, so this has been my review of the Z Fold 2. I do think it is a fantastic phone. It is definitely something futuristic, and if you haven't had a chance to check one of these out in person, I definitely recommend you do so. However, buying something like this does come at a steep price, so $2,000, but there are other options on the market out there that aren't quite as nice as this, but you can still have a folding phone. So there's the Motorola Razr, the Galaxy Z Flip, the Z Flip 5G. You could even find a used Galaxy Fold for under $1,000 now. So there are still options, but I definitely still recommend checking this out because it's got a beautiful display, top-notch specs, and has quite a lot to offer. So I'd like to thank Drew and Michael for offering their thoughts on the Z Fold 2, and I will definitely leave their channels linked down below if you want to check them out. Anyway guys, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did like the video, hit that like button, and if you want to see more like this, consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next video.